I want to share a story that happened to me and my friends one unforgettable New Year's Eve in Japan, a night that still haunts me. The tradition of Hatsumode, or the first shrine visit of the year, is meant to bring blessings and good fortune. But for us, it turned into something straight out of a nightmare. I've told this to only a few people, partly because it sounds completely insane, and partly because the memory still makes my skin crawl. But here goes. My group of friends, Saki, Daichi, Miki, and me, Ryo, decided to do something a little more adventurous for Hatsumode. We wanted to avoid the crowded, touristy shrines in Tokyo and head somewhere tucked away in the countryside. Daichi had heard rumors about a small mountain shrine that supposedly kept ancient traditions alive. It wasn't on any tourist map, and the directions were vague at best. But that only fueled our curiosity. On the evening of December 31st, we hopped into Daichi's old, beat-up car and drove several hours away from the city. By the time we left the highway and started winding our way up the mountain roads, it was nearly 10 o'clock. The December air had a bite to it, and an icy fog clung to the steep slopes. At one point, the headlights lit up a wooden sign by the roadside, half buried in snow, pointing toward the shrine. The characters on it were faded, barely legible. But we took it as a good omen that we were heading the right way. A few turn-offs later, we found ourselves at the bottom of a long stone staircase that rose into the darkness. At the top, hidden by tall, swaying cedars, stood the main gate of the shrine. The place was empty. No visitors. No priests. Just the four of us, an old broken lantern, and a stiff wind that cut right through our coats. Saki made a joke, something like, "At least there won't be a line," but she was the only one who laughed. There was an uneasy vibe none of us could shake. We started up the steps. The only sounds were our own footsteps crunching over the gravel, and the whispering of tree branches in the wind. About halfway up, we noticed that the ancient stone lanterns along the path flickered on, dim, yellowish light dancing inside them. But there was no one around to light them. Saki and Miki exchanged a look, and Daichi tried to shrug it off, muttering something about motion sensors or a caretaker we hadn't noticed. But motion sensors on centuries-old lanterns. It just didn't make sense. By the time we reached the top, the temple gate, an imposing torii carved from dark wood, loomed in front of us. Beyond it, the shrine's courtyard was wide and silent. Snow dusted the rooftops and blanketed the ground. A single paper lantern swayed, hanging from the eaves of the shrine's main hall. Despite the eerie calm, we pressed on because we'd come all this way. And besides, traveling all that distance for Hatsumode was meant to bring extra blessings, right? Inside the courtyard, Daichi found a small stand of omaikuji, fortune-telling paper slips. We each grabbed one, unrolled the faded strip of paper, and shined our phone flashlights on it to read our fortunes. Saki's voice trembled slightly as she read hers. It was a curse, an actual curse, warning of misfortune befalling those who enter the shrine uninvited. She laughed it off like it was just a joke, or a novelty. Daichi's omaikuji was blank except for a single word in old kanji. None of us knew what it said, and that freaked him out more than an outright curse. Miki found a strange symbol drawn on hers that looked almost like a double spiral. As for mine, it was smudged with ink, the characters unreadable. It felt deliberately defaced. I remember a chill crawling up my back, and the hair on my arms standing on end. The logical part of our brains told us this was probably some shrine tradition we didn't understand, or maybe a prank left behind by teenagers. With a forced laugh, Daichi said, "All right, let's head to the main hall and get our blessings." we ended up at a set of sliding wooden doors. No sign of a priest or caretaker. The doors were unlatched, so we quietly opened them. Inside, it looked like nobody had been there for decades. Dust blanketed every surface, save for a path of footprints leading to an inner chamber. Mickey whispered that maybe we should leave an offering and go. But we were curious, and stupidity sometimes wins out over caution. We followed the footprints like it was a trail in a haunted house. They led us to a small room lit by a single, guttering candle. In the candle's glow, we saw an altar, an elaborate arrangement of straw dolls, talismans with archaic writing, and a rusted bell. The air smelled stale, tinged with the faint odor of incense long since burned away. That's when we heard it, a low hum, almost like chanting, floating through the wooden beams above us. It sounded distant, but it was definitely coming from somewhere inside the shrine. Mickey spun around, shining her phone's flashlight into the corners. No one there. The humming grew louder, morphing into something harsher, like a distorted whisper in our ears. My heart pounded so hard, I could feel it in my temples. Saki gasped and pointed to the rusted bell on the altar. It was vibrating, the handle clinking softly against the metal. None of us were touching it. A wave of dread washed over me. Daichi grabbed my arm. "Let's get out of here," he hissed. But the moment we turned to leave, the door to the altar room slammed shut on its own. The entire shrine seemed to moan with the force of the wind picking up outside. We pushed on the door, hammered against it, but it refused to budge. The chanting, or humming, or whatever it was, kept getting louder. It sounded furious, like a wail echoing through the rafters. Then the floorboards beneath us began to creak, as if something inside the wood was crawling, trying to break free. Saki started screaming, it was so piercing, I can still hear it in my nightmares. She fell, clutching her ankle, and I could see a thin trail of blood staining the tatami. There was nothing sharp she could have cut herself on, it was like the floor itself was slicing her skin. Daichi tried to lift her, and that's when we realized the old wooden boards were actually shifting beneath us, rotting away with every step we took. They were turning darker, as if soaked in ink, or blood. Mickey and I searched in a panic for another exit. At the far corner of the room, a narrow passage led us deeper into the shrine. We had no choice but to go forward unless we wanted to get swallowed by the floor. We hurried along the passage, the chanting still pounding in our ears, and emerged into another chamber. This one had sliding doors that stood partially open, revealing the courtyard on the other side. Without thinking, we sprinted to them. We burst outside, the cold air hitting us like a slap in the face. The chanting came with us, echoing through the trees. We stumbled back down the stone steps, practically carrying Saki as she whimpered in pain. Halfway down, the shrine's lanterns flickered ominously again. The flame within them sputtered, and then they all died at once, plunging everything into near total darkness. When we finally reached the car, Daichi flung the doors open, and we clambered inside. He turned the key, desperate for the engine to start, and, by some miracle, it did. He gunned the accelerator, spitting gravel behind us as we sped away from that cursed place. Even as we pulled onto the main road, we could still hear the echo of that haunting melody chasing us through the fog. We never spoke to each other about that night in detail again. Saki recovered, but she still has a thin scar along her ankle that looks like a jagged line burned into her skin. Daichi refuses to drive anywhere near that region. Mickey ended up burning her omaikuji and burying the ashes behind her apartment building. I did the same with mine, though I never understood what the ink-smudged writing had originally said. I can't explain logically what happened. Maybe it was some ancient spirit angry at being disturbed. Maybe we trespassed on a ritual we had no business seeing. Whatever it was, it left us with nightmares that revisit us every New Year's Eve. Now, whenever I hear the distant toll of a temple bell on December 31st, I feel that same tightness in my chest, that same prickling sensation at the back of my neck. The worst part. None of us remember ringing the shrine bell for Hatsumode that night, which is what you're supposed to do to summon blessings. Yet sometimes, in my dreams, I see that rusted bell swinging on its own, tolling an otherworldly echo that never quite fades. And every time I hear it, I'm back in that silent courtyard, trapped under the weight of ancient, watchful eyes. I can still feel the wind, cold as a corpse, chilling my bones, reminding me that some invitations are best left unanswered, even if it's just for the first shrine visit of the new year.